Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm talking about, similar to my last video, I am going to be talking about a series that's exclusive to stream on Netflix right now. This series is called High Score, and I kind of found this one on accident. I was finishing up the Toys That Made Us, and there was a icon that showed up of another series that is available on Netflix. It must have came out earlier this year also because it said 2020 on its information part of its page. Um, and it's about video games. It's about kind of the history of video games and kind of certain eras, how the ESRB got formed, how video games got ratings, how there was the Mario versus Sonic generation in the 90s, how there was the uprise in video games when Pac-Man came along, and there was a fall in video games when the E.T. video game came along. So this series kind of covers all those things. It's over the course of 6 different episodes. I just recently finished all the episodes recently, and I was very, very impressed with what I watched. And like I said, I kind of found this one on accident. I was just going to review the movies that made us, but then I found this series, and I like the series even more. And it's even longer. I think it's even a little bit longer than the movies that made us also. So that's what I'm reviewing for you today in this video. So in High Score, like I said, guys, this is a series where it's kind of a docu-series about the certain points in history in video games, how the series starts with the rise of Pac-Man and how people are getting more interested in video games, how there's this desire to not just have space video games anymore, to actually have a game that can appeal to women, can appeal to children, um, how certain things like Tetris and other games that came along that kind of expanded the audience for video games. They talked about in a different episode about a hotline you could call if you were ever stuck on a video game at one point in time, how that hotline service later became the Nintendo Power Magazine service that I was once subscribed to back when Nintendo Power was around. Like I said, there's an episode about the Mario versus Sonic generation, how Sega was trying to catch up with Nintendo, and how Sonic was kind of their savior for getting them on the right track and helping them boost their sales and hopefully get at a better point than Nintendo and things like that. And then obviously there's things like the ESRB rating system getting formed due to violent video games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and Night Trap is another one that kind of caused that to happen. There's a lot of different things that the series covers. It even covers Doom and how 3D simulation games kind of changed video games forever and things like that. So there's a lot of things that the series covers, mostly with the timeline of video games for the most part. So overall, guys, I really like this series a lot. There's a lot of things in this series where if you love video games at all, you're really going to like what you see here. And like I said, it's more so a historical viewpoint. It doesn't really cover too many modern games. So no Halo, no Call of Duty, no Super Mario Galaxy, nothing super recent. But I would say anything that's Doom and lower as far as the timeline goes, like Doom and earlier. For the most part, it covers almost all those games in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, it does cover kind of how Sega was trying to catch up with Nintendo and things like that. So just a lot of interesting things where if you like video games at all, I think you're really going to have a fun time watching this Netflix series. So from the positives and negatives of High Score, I really like the 8-bit cutscene sequences that they used. So what they were talking about, like boardroom meetings or how a certain game got pitched or things like that, they would have little 8-bit sequences like you're watching this cutscene on an NES game. And it looked really cool. It really was a kind of a neat way to kind of illustrate kind of how these stories were playing out for some of these game designers and programmers. It wasn't just as simple of, guy sitting in a chair telling you a story. They do show like an 8-bit sequence of how certain things got formed and what it would look like if that event in real life happened in a video game at the time and things like that. So I thought it was a nice little cool touch that the series added. Its opening sequence is also done in 8-bit as well. So I thought that was done really in a really cool way as well. So and it's also a very fun and informative series. It's just a series where you'll learn about stuff. You'll learn why they chose a fox for Star Fox, the video game. You'll find out kind of why Sonic was a hedgehog and why they made him blue and things like that. How Street Fighter 2 had a scene that where when you fought E Honda in the game, why that takes place in like a bathroom room and things like that, or a bathhouse, I think is what they called it. So just little fun stuff like that that you probably would have never been able to piece together unless you watch the series. So just fun stuff that happened along the way, like things like that. Charles Martinet narrates the series too, and I actually got to meet Charles Martinet in real life. Really cool guy. He voices Super Mario, and he voices all the plumber characters in the Super Mario video games and things like that. Really cool guy. Really cool to see him narrate the series. Definitely an appropriate choice for a series like this. So it was really cool to see him narrate the series. Kind of put his Mario voice to the side for a little bit. Just use his own voice and narrate this really cool video game series. I also like how the series shows the impact of certain games. How um, Sonic created the rise of certain the desire to get Sega games, and how there's even a segment in one of the episodes of how the Madden NFL games became popular, and kind of how they got more people into it, and how kind of Sega had a good deal for them at one point, and how the PC was kind of their best bet at one point. Just certain things like that that you would have never been able to find out unless you watched the series, that of how certain games came to be and things like that. So really cool things as far as how showing the impact of video games goes. I also like how the show kind of shows the cultural shift in games, how when a game series like Mortal Kombat came along, the desire to have more violent video games came along. How when Doom came along, there was more of a desire for more 3D simulation and more really kind of putting you in the game and making you feel like you're a part of this 3D environment and things like that. So it really does show kind of the cultural shift in games, and how it showed a point in time where people were wanting more things than just a space game, or they wanted a little bit more than Pac-Man, or they wanted a little bit more than Super Mario Brothers. How there was this constant cultural shift, and how these game companies had to really kind of match up with what the society was wanting at the time and things like that. So really cool stuff as far as that stuff was concerned. For my negatives of high score, though, sometimes the series would cover a certain thing and then would completely shift over to a completely different thing in the same episode. So I can't name a specific example, but for example, like you can't really go from the story of developing Night Trap and go back to kind of the forming of the ESRB rating and showing kind of how violence in games caused it and things like that. You can do, obviously focus on Night Trap, like kind of how that formed the ESRB rating, kind of how that contributed it, and they do show that. And obviously, Mortal Kombat and all that other stuff contributing to that. But it just felt like sometimes it was a little too scatterbrained, that it was a little too, we want to cover this, but also cover that. But we also want to shift back into this completely different thing after shifting back into this other completely different thing. So there's times like that where, like for example, you can't do a video about, or you can't cover an episode about the comedy genre and cover the horror genre in the same episode. It doesn't quite fit. So if you either have to do one or the other, and you have to find a way to make it work for both, or it's not going to work and you have to separate the two somehow. So that's just my opinion, but that's something about this series I thought was a little bothersome, was sometimes it would cover this completely different thing, shift into this completely different thing, go back to that completely different thing from earlier, and then go back to that completely different thing from earlier. So it was just kind of an editing choice that I thought could have been better organized on their part. Also, the series is a little occasionally slow moving. There is some segments where it's like, okay, let's pick up the pace. Let's go back to that really interesting Mario versus Sonic thing you were talking about earlier. Let's go back to that interesting thing about what really kind of formed the ESRB rating and things like that. So there's times in the series where it might focus on a person, or it might focus on a subject that kind of sort of has to do with the episode, but kind of sort of doesn't at the same time. And as a result, it does feel a little slow moving as a result in some of the episodes. But overall, I'm going to give High Score a 9 out of 10. I think it's a really well done series for Netflix. They really kind of went out of their way to make it feel like you're watching a video game at times, like with the 8-bit sequences and things like that. Charles Martinet narrating it obviously really helped it. It showed the impact of video games. But like I said, sometimes the shift in editing and the shift of focus of certain episodes was a little bothersome. And I think they could have found a better way to pace it in certain episodes, because it does feel a little slow moving at times. So 9 out of 10 for me. I highly recommend seeing High Score, and it's available to stream on Netflix right now exclusively on their streaming service.